Mr. Epstein?
Yes.
Mr. Kriege?
Yes.
Motion carries. There is no old business carrying forward, so we have two items of new business tonight. One is actually sort of a continuation, I believe, of action we took at our last meeting, which is a zone change request from A4 Rural Residential to C2 General Commercial for the property located at 3204 North King Road. I believe this is the property that sits next to Central, is that right, correct?
It's the closest one to
It's the
Central.
closest one to Central.
It's the southernmost of the
Okay.
five
Okay.
residential properties.
And Daryl, you want to go ahead and...
The applicant is requesting a zone change from A4 Rural Residential to C2 General Commercial for the property located at 3204 North King Road. A single-family dwelling currently sits on the parcel. It is bounded by commercially zoned properties on all sides but one. An owner-occupied single-family dwelling abuts the property to the north. The site of the former Central Elementary School at 3100 King Road was rezoned to C2 earlier this year and purchased by the applicant. The applicant is requesting this zone change in order to utilize the subject property along with the former school site for development of an emergency room facility. Staff recommends approval of the zone change request from A4, A4 Rural Residential to C2 General Commercial. A change to C2 zoning would be consistent with the commercially zoned parcels on this segment of King Road between Central Avenue and Covert Road. Additionally, the request is consistent with the Sylvania Township Land Use Plan 2007 update. And I would also like to add that the Lucas County Plan Commission unanimously recommended approval of the zone change on September 24th.
Is there anybody in the audience who would like to address this issue before the zoning commission discusses it or add any additional information? Everybody thinks okay. After this one is, if the motion carries to rezone it, will there be any houses left there that are not zoned? Or is there just one now left?
There will be two left.
There will be two left? So 3 out of the 5 will have been zoned?
Correct.
We did 2 last time, this will be a third one.
Yes.
Any questions from members of the zoning commission about this?
Just one, only because it might pertain to both properties in the discussion as we go forward tonight. Just regarding the signage, there was an issue at 2707. I was there Friday, and there was no sign posted, and talking with the neighbors, but I did not go by the central property to see when those signs were posted.
The zone change signs?
Yeah, and so there was a few complaints by the neighbors, just in all fairness to surrounding areas that don't maybe receive a mailing, that no sign was posted.
Right.
And, you know, 2303 of the application process says 14 days within the application, a sign must be posted.
Yeah, we're not required to put a sign up. We usually do that as a courtesy, and
Okay.
typically we do it before this point. That was an oversight on our part.
Sure.
We did send an email out to the road department today for them to put signs up, so that the signs will be up well before the trustees.
I mean, I just
meet on
think
this.
we're cutting pretty close putting the sign up, and in all fairness to all of our community members, on the same day as the meeting. And I would appreciate any input from anyone on this board in that regard. Because it says right here that we are required, the applicant is required, we provide the sign within 14 days of the application being filed with the zoning department. And no one is to touch, I mean, I can read it word for word if you want.
Oh, that's all right.
No one is to basically touch or remove the sign except for the applicant, agent, or township shall interfere or remove the sign during the noted time is to be posted. So, any thoughts from this commission?
I'll just say I noticed the same thing. I was driving down King Road on Saturday or Sunday, I forget what, and because I was sort of curious just to see which of the, you know, it's always hard to visualize exactly, you know,
Right.
just from pictures. Yeah, and I noticed there were signs.
Yeah, it was an oversight on our part.
I mean, I passed it
Apologize
twice
for that, but
because
again,
the
it was-
address is peeling off of the mailbox. And I'm looking for the zone notice sign to inspect the property, and the gentleman right next door said there's never been a sign. So I was under the impression that we were required
No, we are,
to post it?
we are not. We are required to send out the notices, the public notice in the Blade.
So am I
And
reading outdated material that says right here we're required to post it? This is right off of our website.
23, I'm sorry, what did you say?
Under application, which would be Article 23, zoning commission, then it would be 2303.
2302?
2303, just before Lucas County Planning Commission hearing, there's a paragraph. Must post a minimum of one on-site notice within 5 feet of the property line on subject property adjacent to the public road. Said sign shall be provided by the township and installed in a secure fashion within 14 calendar days of the application being filed with the zoning department. I mean, I'm not trying to be a stickler, I'm just saying in all
No, I
fairness, the
understand
other
what you're saying,
zone
but
changes we have done have always had a sign, and I thought that was protocol, and
I don't know that we've always had a sign. I think there's been a few that never was put up or was put up.
everyone that I've
Again,
inspected thus far has had a sign, so.
We're not required by the Ohio Revised Code to put a sign. We are required to send out a notice within 10 days to neighbors within 200 feet and public notice in the newspaper within 10 days. Excuse me.
Was that initially posted?
Was-
Yeah, the zone changes in that area.
Was the sign posted?
Yeah, was it initially posted like for the previous one we had?
No. I recall. The one by Mercy or?
Yeah,
School?
this is just a continuation of that.
Well, yeah, this is
Basically.
just a different property.
I think your point is when we get to the second one.
Yeah, because just because of the road that abuts it to the rear, Heisler, there may be some people that are fairly going to be close to this that maybe will never know because they're outside of that 200-foot mailing
Okay.
notice. And I think in all fairness, if they're going down King, they deserve the right to know that, hey, there's a zone change coming up on a property in my own, close to backyard, so.
Well, anything that abuts the subject property would be within the 200 feet.
I was just wondering, I mean, I guess we're not required, but then, to me, then this whole application thing is kind of, it says right in here, the application is null and void if it's not posted. So, the way I read it, it is, you are required to post it.
We're not required by ORC, Ohio.
But you're
Revised Code.
required by the township trustees, the way they, and this commission.
Well, we aren't, the applicant would be by reading this.
Sure. I guess we can proceed, but I guess I'd like to see that enforced a little more going forward, so neighboring people can be alerted and not the day of a meeting. I mean, this is a slippery slope we're going down here. If this, the trustees are kind of aware of this also, so as we go forward, I think we need to make sure these applicants are, you're providing them a sign and they're putting it up, so.
Well, and again, it's probably up now or will be put up tomorrow. The trustees will be hearing this, be November 5th, because 4th being election day.
So there will be at
they've
least
moved
14 days for people to observe and know before the finality of it.
Right.
I'm not, this has never happened before. The big issue was, did the neighbors across the street behind, left and right, receive notification, and was it put in the paper?
Right.
And that's all we've ever done in the past. I've never heard of putting a sign up. I realize what it says, unless it means, not necessarily for this meeting, perhaps for the trustees, because as she says.
Well, technically, it should have been up, if this was filed, and Mr. Orvitz can say, I think it was July, it's saying 14 days of the file of the application. So, I mean, this thing should have been up for months, really, all of them. And I know there was one on Central Avenue in front of the school for a long time for the original Mercy project. I'm not sure if it was from the initial application date, but it was well up before this meeting, at least 30 days. So I just think we need to be aware of it as a commission going forward, in all fairness to our residents. That's why we're up here, really. So I'm not trying to be a stickler, but I think, some of the neighbors mentioned it to me. So I'm just bringing it before us in all fairness to all of our residents.
Sure.
So if we want to work on this after this date and maybe make some changes and clarify it, or say it must be posted 14 days before the zoning commission meeting, I mean, I would be fair with us pursuing that at a later date, maybe when there's nothing on the agenda, and we can discuss it as a board and go from there.
I'm going to bring us back to this one, the 3204 North King Road. I mean, this is consistent with the ones we did last month. Surely the neighbors there should not be unaware. So for this one in particular, I do think we can move forward. So if there's no other comment about this 3204 one, can we have a motion to approve it?
I'd so moved.
Okay, we've got a motion and I think a second. Mr. Epstein made the motion, Mr. Sable. Because like I said, this has certainly been a process here. Other properties adjacent were just rezoned last month. The neighbors should be fully aware here of what's going on.
And technically, there's really only one neighbor,
Right.
other than the landowner or across the street. So,
Although there's two houses. Yeah, hopefully you can continue to negotiate with them, or I won't even ask if they're, anyway, we have a motion, we have a second. Can we call the roll on item number 1?
Mr. Epstein?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Casper?
Yes.
Mrs. Maline?
Yes,
Mr. Kriege?
yes.
motion carries. Which brings us to our second one, which is the zone change request from A4 rural residential to R2 residential for the property located at 2707 North King Road. Daryl, do you want to walk through this, and then we'll give members of the audience a chance to speak.
Are you talking about this new change here on 2707?
Yes.
I'm a neighbor.
Yeah.
No, I wasn't there.
Yeah, you'll get a chance to speak, but we're going to let him go
Oh, I
first.
thought we already had it.
Nope.
The applicant is requesting a zone change from A4 rural residential to R2 residential for the property located at 2707 North King Road in order to develop a 23-lot single-family subdivision on nearly 7 acres. A single-family dwelling currently sits on the parcel, which is bounded on all sides by A4 single-family dwellings. While the subject parcel is surrounded by A4 zoning, there is higher density R1 and R2 zone developments existing on both sides of King Road between Central Avenue and Bancroft Street. Additionally, the A4 zoning designation in this area originally stems from the lack of public water and sewer. However, the infrastructure now exists for these utilities along this segment of King Road. Staff recommends approval of the zone change request from A4 rural residential to R2 residential, given the presence of public utilities as well as other R1 and R2 properties currently in the area. And again, the Lucas County Plan Commission unanimously recommended approval of this zone change on September 24th.
So St. James is zoned what? R2. The properties across the street, all those houses are already R2? Mm-hmm. Okay, and then whatever they are down by Bancroft and King, there's like the condos or whatever?
Right. Talking about these right?
Yeah, well, down here, yeah.
Yeah, those are, I believe there are one, yes.
Anything else to add? Okay, I'm going to entertain some comments on this, since I believe people have probably come to speak to this issue. I ask you to go to the microphone, state your name and address, and address your comments to the Zoning Commission for our consideration.
My name is George Orovitz. I'm the consulting engineer for Mr. Moline and Mr. Fuller, the proposed developers of this particular site. as Darrell has indicated, not only the zoning board of Sylvania Township, but also the planning commission of Lucas County have recommended unanimously this zoning change. It's consistent with other developments in the area, specifically the St. James Woods development, which is directly across the street from this site. There were about 3 or 4 people who had attended the Planning Commission meeting, and the concerns that they voiced was one gentleman asked whether or not the subdivision or proposed subdivision was going to be on water wells or are they going to have public water. Obviously, in this particular case, they will all be on a public water system. The same with the sanitary sewer. The sanitary sewer will be provided to this site. There will be no septic tanks. They will all be on public sanitary sewer system. The Planning Commission also approved the preliminary plat for this development with the 23 lots and 41 conditions of approval. We agreed with and concurred with all 41 conditions. The condition with respect to storm drainage is very, very similar to what we're required to do in every development, and that is we must detain the storm water, at least the first inch of water, for 24 hours to ensure the fact that if there's any impurities that it may have picked up during the storm and gotten into the storm sewer system, that it would not get into Smith Ditch, which eventually gets out to the lake and would pollute the waters of the United States. The 2 front lots are in effect where the detention ponds would be located. One on each side of the entryway, which would also be utilized to accent with landscaping to identify the feature of entry into the development. Under no circumstances can this development release more water at any time than it is currently releasing at what would be considered an agricultural rate. Even during a heavy storm, we have to provide storage capabilities for a storm that would occur once every 25 years in those developments to make sure that we don't have any surge on the storm sewer system. That was another question that was asked by one of the residents that was in attendance. The other item that they asked had to do with the potential of wetlands. Under the University of Toledo's wetland inventory map, they had indicated that there is a chance that there is wetlands in the southwest corner of the development around Lot 13. The developers are currently having that area delineated to determine if there are wetlands in that area would then be isolated so that it is not disturbed and not destroy any wetlands that may be in that particular area. It is not definite that they're there, but they're certainly taking the precautions to make sure that if it is there, they're going to identify it. That is also one of the 41 conditions that were attached to the preliminary plat. In addition to that, the county engineer has discussed with us that we will be required to clean Smith Ditch. Smith Ditch has an awful lot of debris in the bottom of it, overgrowth that is impeding the flow of water. They've put an additional condition on that ditch must in fact be cleaned so that the water can in fact flow freely through that area, and that bank protection be also installed to ensure the fact that we don't have erosion within the ditch itself.
Would that just be during the initial construction or an ongoing commitment?
Ongoing commitment, because what we'll wind up doing is impacting the banks with rock protection, which will prevent erosion from occurring. The last item that the county engineer and I had discussed because the developer had intended on doing it anyway, is we're going to have a traffic impact study prepared. We really don't have to. There was no condition that said that we had to, but due to the fact that the developers are extremely concerned about the safety of people entering and exiting this development, we're going to have a traffic impact study done to determine whether or not a left turn lane into the development is justified. By that would mean we would have to do improvements to King Road to provide a left turn stacking lane so that through traffic could pass on through and no one would wind up getting rear-ended waiting to turn into the subdivision with a left turn. That study as well will be provided in addition to the 41 conditions. All in all, I think this is a very, very nice development. It's a medium-density development. It's not a low-density development. For 23 lots on 6+ acres in this proposed plat, we have a quality developer in the way of Mr. Moline, who has been Builder of the Year by the Home Builders Association several times during his career, is building homes in this area, in this location. So I think we're assured of the fact that it's going to be quality housing in this location. They are not cutting any corners. They're assuring that everything is going to be exactly to code and above and beyond, so that this development will be one that the township would be proud of. We appreciate the recommendation of both the Zoning Commission, or Planning Commission of Lucas County, and also the staff of Sylvania's zoning board, and ask for your support in the zoning change. Thank you. Any questions?
What are going to be the approximate size of the houses?
I think Jim said they're going to be somewhere in the range of around 2,000 square foot per house. They'll be predominantly one-story homes.
Yeah.
The market, I believe, that they're shooting for is empty nesters who really don't want to climb stairs, kind of like myself. Yeah.
Yep. Any other questions from members of the Zoning Commission for Mr. Orfitz? Okay, is there anybody else who would like to address the Zoning Commission?
I'm the neighbor, so I'd like...
Then you'd have to go to the microphone, please, state your name and address.
Well, he did address a lot, but I was going to ask
Again,
about...
state your name and address.
William H. Bacon, 2735 King Road, Toledo, Ohio, 43617. And what I was addressing is I think they're trying to put too many houses. It's a little too dense. I think they could shorten them, make it a little larger lots. I think they needed an exit to Hessler, because we keep pushing everything on King Road. I can't hardly get out of my driveway. Tonight, I had to turn right, go down to Bancroft, turn left, and come back around. I couldn't even get out of my driveway. That's how heavy the traffic is at this time of night. And there's a water problem. And that front yard fills up with water. There's about an acre and a half. The water will be this deep when you get a storm. That's the three issues. I think he addressed a lot of it, but that's what we should be concerned about. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who would like to address the Zoning Commission? Before we, again, state your name and address, please.
Good evening. For the record, I'm John Healy, 8330 Ledgestone Avenue, Sylvania, Ohio. I'm an agent for, and I'm here representing the Congregation Chabad House that just purchased the property directly across the street on the northern part at 2728 North King Road. The congregation received notice of this commission hearing tonight. They wanted me to come represent them and tell you that they provide their full support with the zoning request and think it would be a benefit to the community.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to address the zoning commission on this issue? I would note that the members of the commission have also been given a series of emails from a Mr. Wilson, which seems to focus primarily on traffic issues, if I can summarize that correctly. Okay, gentlemen, questions for Daryl or George, or do we just want to open the discussion?
I guess I'm of the opinion of the neighbors that, here we go again, a little too dense, surrounded on three sides by A4, and we're receiving full-fledged green light, go ahead, and almost a little bit of issue of spot zoning with this density surrounded by A4 on all sides. That's my opinion. So actually 4 sides, if you look at the congregation across the street, is also zoned still A4. I think the neighbors would be happier with maybe even an R1. That changes the lot size from 60-foot widths to 70, so it's not a huge change. Maybe only knocks off 2 lots, but it opens up for a little nicer homes, a little larger lots, a little more green space, and maybe a better development. I don't know. Those are my thoughts. It is very low. The site's very low. If you're standing in his driveway, I mean, I would, without taking any shots, it's at least a foot lower than the other sides, and hence that's why the ditch is to the south edge of the property, because the ditches usually flow through low-lying land. So,
Any other comments or questions?
I do. The width of the lots, it is, they are 60. It's hard to make it out on this, on the drawing we have.
they're 60.
That's 60.
Yeah. Which is the minimum width in a R2. Was there any recommendation or issues with the fire department with one way in, one way out? No issue. I know that's been an issue in the past, but maybe not on this size of a subdivision.
There is approval of the fire department on the cul-de-sac turn?
Yes.
When I first looked at it, I guess, I had very mixed things, because to me it's very consistent with what's just down the street with it. I mean, if you go down to Bancroft and King, I mean, it's the same type of thing, only I think those are more condos and this would be more single-family ranches for, like you say, people like me who don't like to go up and down steps. I think the issue of the spot zoning, while communities change and it's not as big as if we were going to put a commercial property there, I mean, those houses aren't going to stay on those big, beautiful lots forever the way they are. I mean, I just don't.
But there's quite a few.
But there's quite a few that are around there, and
Still there.
this just puts this
Yeah,
right in the middle.
Right in the middle of them.
And that's that question, are you starting a whole series of then the next guy comes and sells his house and, puts one in? And, I mean, I think the density is a realistic consideration. I like the idea of the project, but.
If you drive down to Kings Cove, which is on the other side of Holstein,
Yeah.
I believe those are 70-foot lots, not 60. It's not a huge difference, but I think it saves a little bit of, for the neighbors and maybe makes them a little nicer homes. And Holstein, it shows on this map we have that it goes all the way through. It does not. It's a stub street
Right.
from both sides, which some of the neighbors were frustrated why that was never connected, just to offer a little bit of traffic relief to go to Heisler. I drove past at 5:30 and I'm going south. I went around back to Heisler, back to Central. So the traffic was lined up well past this parcel. And I know we're on the slippery slope of traffic again, we've tried to avoid that issue, but closer to main streets before, that could help absorb that. Here, we're about right in the middle of
Right.
the section. And also surrounded by 2.5 to 5 acre lots, so that's my concern.
But yet, if we try to impose those kind of restrictions, which I'm not sure is really our place, do we then make the project cost prohibitive for a developer to say, you know, hey, we want 3 less houses and his 70-foot lots?
Sure, but
And then
your
it's,
lot
then the
are
improvements
higher.
that he's talking about with the ditch, the road, don't happen.
I think they still have to happen if they're in the conditions of the county.
Yeah.
And, you know, from the money standpoint, if we consider that, larger lots bring more money and nicer homes. So the developer's not out anything by giving the guy a little bigger yard per se, or a little bigger house with a side load garage as opposed to a front load garage. So,
But you'd probably lose, what, 4 houses if you had to go to a 70-foot? And you may have already lost one if the one's a wetland.
And if the wetlands are excessive, we've lost a lot to begin with.
Yeah. So you could go from, 24?
23 to 18, which would make it not economically feasible.
And then we just have
All the
a,
improvements that have to be done.
and then we just have a soggy, wet lot sitting there with the house that an owner doesn't want anymore.
Remember, the sanitary sewer has to be extended from the, I can't remember the name of the street to the north, Finchwood, has to be extended down to service this area. And the water line has to come from Wembley Boulevard, has to be extended a 12-inch line going north towards Central Avenue to help complete that loop of water pressure and water supply for that entire area. It won't be an 8-inch line. So there are extraordinary costs that are associated with developing this property.
Anybody else's thoughts? Any other thoughts? Any other comments from our members here?
I guess I'd like to make a motion then, if we're done, to approve.
Okay, we have one motion to approve. I will second that. I would remind the members of our audience who are here that this is only a preliminary thing, that it would then go to the trustees, and it will take at least a vote of at least 2 trustees
Right.
to make this a final zoning change. So this is just our preliminary thoughts on appropriate use of this property. And no other comments? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Kruegi?
No.
Mrs. Himmeline?
Yes.
Mr. Sabal?
Yes.
Mr. Casper?
Yes.
Mr. Epstein?
Yes.
Motion carries and is forwarded then to the trustees.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any additional items that we need to consider?
No, I do want to just reiterate that that's tentatively November 5th, that'll be before the trustees.
And there will be a sign on the property to
Yes.
make sure
And
that
that's
the public is aware.
a 4 o'clock meeting.
That people have multiple ways to reach the trustees and voice their opinions.
Yes.
Any other comments or questions for the good of the order?
I have something.
Okay.
What he brought up about the book is a good point. I haven't seen that before, but maybe that needs to be looked into. If we're not doing it, then let's get it changed. And if it's supposed to be done, well then,
Let's do it.
that's right. But excellent point. I mean, how can you dispute what you said?
Sure. I mean, it's in here, and that's a problem. Maybe we've been overlooking this a lot.
Well, I mean, I don't always drive by if I have a good, if it's something I go by. I just happened to be going because I was going to my son's, and I made my daughter drive down King Road. I said, I want to see, because I wanted to see that one, just where it was, because it's close to some people I know, who live over in that area of St. James, and it was like, okay, which one is it? And of course, going down the street, then I didn't circle back, but I did notice there, and then at the other property, there wasn't a sign. So I know other times when I've tried to go by a property, especially when we believe there might be an issue. I mean, like the one up at the school, there's not an issue there. I'm sorry. But with the other one, to let the neighbors know.
I think we also, going forward, need to, for the record, take a look at conditional use in A4. As Darrell's well aware, there's some confusion or excitement about rumors of what's going on in Western Spanien Township with a residential care
You mean
facility.
A3?
Is it A3?
Agriculture?
Sure. And
Where specifically?
talking with John, Brent and Mitchell. But going forward, there's still a lot of A3, A4 in the Spanien Township.
Yeah.
So if we're going to start running into this continuing problem of residential care facilities, maybe this board needs to look into this and change some wording or possibly remove that as a conditional use. I'm not saying we have to do it tonight, but
Sure.
if we could look into that and look at other surrounding areas, maybe Perrysburg Township, and see what they're doing, because the scales of a residential care facility can vary widely, and my prime example would be the one by the Sumanian Democratic Club on Centennial.
Yeah.
The one that is a house, which to me is a residential care facility. And then you go all the way out to a large scale as Sunset
Yeah.
Home, which is also a conditional use. And to me, that's technically a nursing home, but they slid under as a residential care facility. So I think we need to clarify some language there at least, or maybe even some restrictions or boundaries to the size of these things, or eliminate it altogether as a conditional use, and then these projects would have to come before this board and the trustees. Where right now they may, I wouldn't say slip through the cracks, because they're still going through all the county approvals and that, but they can get away with a lot of things that we don't get a vote on it, the trustees don't get a vote on it. It just goes before BZA and it's a yes, no. So with Darrell's consideration, if we could at least discuss that and look at it going forward.
Well, I mean,
We may not catch this project, and I'm not trying to stop it or oppose it in any way. I've just heard in the last week a lot of discussion on this, and I think being an A3, A4 owner, property owner myself, I think we can clarify a lot of things going forward, and it maybe have some more say on the township level of what we'd like to see, or recommend a PUD, and some trails and stuff through these things. And I'm just opening up the dialogue. And
well, one thing I know we had, I don't know, it's got to be 4 or 5 or 6 months now, there was something else like signs or something, wasn't it?
Right,
I mean, we've got a couple issues that are sort of hanging there.
Yeah,
that
as soon as things slow down, I wanted to write up something on that regarding the monument sign.
I was going to say, I mean, we typically only have meetings when there are actual items to zone. Is there a need, just because we haven't done it in a year or so, to just have a meeting to say, are there some problems, and start to think about them, like the signs or that?
We can do that. I do want to note that under the definitions in our zoning resolution for residential care facility, it says includes assisted living facility, nursing home, rest home, adult daycare, group home, or any other similar institution. So, nursing home does
Sure.
fall under that definition.
yeah, see, I didn't read it. I was
Residential care.
looking kind of for that a definition, and that helps summarize it. But that's maybe where going forward we could change some verbiage or even eliminate that, and that way the township would just have a little more control. And we maybe even look and see if it fits with the other conditional uses in that category. And as we talk about it and go back, we might think, hey, it maybe doesn't. Maybe it's too much of an impact in those districts at this point. So I think we should just open it up. And John King, talking with him, he's been on the board longer than me, said he had an asterisk by it in his notes and he thinks maybe this commission has touched on this issue in the past, but maybe never came to fruition, but he said it was in his notes, so we can maybe even search you guys, if you have times past minutes, and just see kind of where the discussion went, if it was even discussed previous years, so.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I thought maybe you would remember also.
No.
Ms. King
I
couldn't
mean, I remember when,
Mark.
but I wasn't on the zoning commission. I remember when they built Sunset, and
Sure.
then
And Mahoney
Kingston,
may
of
also,
course.
as a trustee, be able to offer us some insight on if, when he was on the zoning commission, discussed that matter.
Yeah, Kingston was part of when they cleaned up the junkyards. I mean, those are the two big ones.
Well, and you also remember that Sunset backs up to a electrical junction from
Right.
Edison, so there wasn't a lot of neighbors, and then the other side of the road is Richfield Township. So they're kind of on the outskirt edge, and almost in a industrial district, so there wasn't much opposition because it really was a good site for it and a good use for that agricultural land. And I think it helped bring some utilities out that way, and then the developers all utilized them also. But right now, I think we're treading down a different road and wedging it in between a bunch of residences. So we'll see. I just wanted to open up the dialogue and take a look at this and bring it up for discussion, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Maybe a talking meeting sometime in the not too. Anything else that we need to discuss? Hearing nothing, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion second. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Creedy?
Yes.
Mr. Epstein?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Casper?
Yes.
Mrs. Himmeline?
Yes. Do we have anything scheduled for November?
We do. Was it 7?
So a possibility of a meeting in November.
Sunset. Speaking.
Speaking
Okay.
of.
Have a nice
I
evening,
guess
everybody.
we better get used to
didn't see
nursing
that there.
homes and assisted living and senior centers being
The baby
on the
boomers are
agenda.
going to change